Good morning, Voyagers. I am the last Omnitech, your favorite robot American. And welcome to another session of Omni Draws. This time, specifically, Gentry, Dolaan ain't no... Hold on. What the heck happened there? Gentry, Dolaan ain't no fascist, a Helldivers 2 fan comic. I hope you're all having a lovely morning so far. I am doing perfectly good myself at the moment. We're just currently in the process of getting everything set up. I think we're pretty good. Let's see if the face cam turns on first thing in the morning. Hey, look at that. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to see you all. Consortium of Harmony, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Along with everyone else who's currently tuning in, this is actually a live stream. Unlike a lot of other YouTube videos, I tend to do almost everything here live. I'm trying to build towards doing a couple of actual proper YouTube videos, but for now, this is just a different Twitch. Hopefully one a little friendlier. So, a pleasure to have you all on board. Let's jump right into it. Many of you all are probably at least a little peripherally familiar with my Gentry Dolaan Ain't No Fascist webcomic, which is actually set... It's actually set in the world of Helldivers 2. Let me just make sure my audio is not completely overwhelmed by the music. There we go. Let's turn that down a little bit. There we go. So in the world of Helldivers 2. Now, Gentry Dolaan Ain't No Fascist is very much a story about a Helldiver who's turning against Super Earth, and namely doing so as an exploration of fascism, what it means to fight it, and the many different concessions and struggles that someone who's fighting for real freedom has to deal with. This has been a thing that's obviously tied to current events, and very much is a thing that I've been very passionate about for over the past couple of months and the past year. This has sort of been my way of working through these feelings myself. So, let's pop on over here to our art channel and see what we're about. So, up until now, I've had many different characters and versions of these characters popping in. Let's see if I can... Whoop, there you go. I've had many different, sort of peeks behind the curtain at the different factions that are present within the Helldivers universe. I recently just started the TRA, which is the Terminated Restoration Alliance, and its subject matter, which is basically a bunch of Terminids and the folks that fight for them. Namely, the folks that fight for what they might have been once. And so, that's on one side. But Gentry is what we would call a bot diver. And for those of you who are familiar with Helldivers, you would know the Automatons. They're very distinctive. Black and red silhouette, very immediately recognizable. Actually impossible to miss, really, if we're being truthful here. And so, they're actually the ones who sort of instigate this entire thing with Gentry. The entire premise of the webcomic is built on the idea that Gentry was actually captured. And while he was captured, he basically struck a deal with an automaton that basically gave him the opportunity to try something new. Gave him cybernetics so that after being seriously maimed in an exopiloting accident, and giving him an opportunity to build something new. And so, Gentry works to both liberate humans from the Super Earth's government, and hopefully tone down the automatons from their slightly more malicious tendencies. But the automatons aren't just this monolith. Hi, Coyote. Good to have you on board. The automatons are very much as diverse and unique as we are. This is in no small part because automatons are built using us as a template. This is where we get into a bit of fanon on my end. I'm making a webcomic about a video game whose story is, by intention, told from unreliable narrators and constantly evolving. So I have to sort of work around the details of it as best as I can, and try to make things as close as I can. And that means that working with one of my incredible friends, Red Right Hand, and a number of other people, we've slowly been developing this idea of guiding intelligences, command intelligences in the automatons. And every different sub-faction has their own equivalents. You will often see in my comics a reference to the Coordinator, who is this particularly powerful, intelligent super machine that's more or less a strategic mind. Its entire purpose is to rally the automatons, and to, namely, work to the defense of their existence in the face of an absolutely implacable enemy. And anyone who's played Helldivers knows we murdered a lot of them. We've murdered a lot of automatons. It's very common for us to have objectives that say, like, kill 6 billion bugs, kill 3 billion bots, stuff like that. And so the automaton is one of the generals of this overarching, massive machine intelligence. And so this coordinator character isn't just in charge of normal automatons. I assume, like many of the folks in our little Trader Diver universe, our Traderverse, I guess, we assume that these intelligences have different ways of waging war. That's what's led to their prominence. They have their own methods, their own ideas. They have their own goals. The Coordinator's goal is simple: to end war with Super Earth. Preferably, humanity should survive. Those are the two big goals. It's 1, end the conflict with Seif. 2, hopefully we avoid killing all humanity. Humanity's kind of cool. But he isn't working alone. He's working with the Vanguards. So the Vanguard are, and this is where we get into the art I'm working on today, a lot of the automaton characters I'm working on for the webcomic. They are solely made out of my brain along with the Coordinator. These are not canon. These are fanon. So don't get your tights in a twist. If you're like, that's not how it went. Yes, you're right. It probably isn't. But I'm making a webcomic here. I have a lot to take liberties. So, the Vanguard program is basically the Coordinator's answer to how do you deal with an armed military force that drops planet-side and murders people indiscriminately. How do you handle that? How do you handle just some random guy dropping out of orbit in a tin can, smashing behind your lines, and calling in an ungodly amount of ordnance from a tiny destroyer that pops in and out of orbit and just rains hell on you for like anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, and then they just sort of fuck off again? That's really hard to plan around. Just this, what is basically a glorified suicide bomber in a lot of ways, is kind of how a lot of how I think the automatons would probably view Helldivers. They're not particularly concerned with their own safety. They don't often act with what we would consider tact on an individual level, like they have tactical loadouts and stuff, but they're basically first-person shooter characters, and they behave as such. And they're often very chaotic and have an insanely high attrition rate, but they kill a disproportionate amount of bots, and that has to be handled. So the Vanguard program, so far, is my take on how you would fight that. Basically, we need to make a weapon system specifically geared towards killing Helldivers. Not like the normal bots, which are basically a standing army that are invading. This is a specific counterforce. Think of this as the equivalent of, say, strategic weapons and tactics in a police force, where the purpose of SWAT is to counter a very distinctive threat that your average officer wouldn't have the tools to handle. Ostensibly. I'm not going to get into the fascism of the police. We have a whole other story for that. In this particular instance, each of the Vanguard are designed to kill Helldivers explicitly as a hard counter. They have their own unique methodologies of doing so. So far, you've all seen Vanguard 14, this figure here on the left. Now, Vanguard 14 is actually currently like the leader of the Vanguard and the most successful of the Vanguard. So, she is built around having a large armor-piercing field gun mounted on her shoulder, and also being incredibly nimble and agile and able to sort of secure herself as mobile artillery. Most Helldivers are vulnerable in very specific times, and so she strikes them when they're most vulnerable and theoretically least likely to strike back, which is during deployment. So anyone who's played Helldivers, you're familiar with the whole, like, Helldivers flying in from orbit and they smash into the planet. And for the most part, it doesn't seem like it's really touched on that they're particularly, like, hurtling through the atmosphere. It's not a super safe position to be in. However, the truth of the matter is, Hellpods are actually pretty durable. The little bit of research and detail they go into is that Hellpods actually rely on their incredible velocity to shrug off most potential risks. Basically, by hurtling towards the planet in a white-hot coffin, the sheer velocity of the thing, combined with wind shear and its heat, basically create a cushioning layer that deflects all but the highest armor-penetrating weaponry. More or less makes it impossible to penetrate one of these things. All these, by the way, are panels from the webcomic. In case anyone's curious, you can find the webcomic on my Patreon. We'll get to that in a second. So, as a result, you have this pretty much indestructible pod. So, Vanguard 14's counter to that is a field gun specifically designed with a high enough velocity and penetrative force and mass to punch through the pod and obliterate it before it hits the ground. Basically turning any Helldiver deployment into a turkey shoot. It's a surprisingly effective tool, but it's one of many different methods. Each Vanguard has a shared sort of like base schematic plan, as you can sort of see here a little bit, where pretty much each of these Vanguard have an interchangeable series of parts. They almost always have digit-grade legs, their limbs are usually multi-jointed, they have a very specific head design that almost always has 3 receptors and 4 facing cameras, so basically they're able to look in all directions at once. These are some basics. We're going to kind of go and work on a new Vanguard today. So far I haven't touched on what each Vanguard does too much, but I have made 3 named Vanguard units. This is in part because the Vanguards aren't particularly... how do I put this? They die a lot. Unlike Helldivers, the Automatons normally can absorb this kind of attrition, but what makes Vanguard units unique and powerful is their unique countering abilities. They're not using any one mechanism to fight Helldivers, each of them uses their own, completely bespoke method of fighting. And as a result, they have to develop that and modify themselves, which means every dead Vanguard is a Vanguard that's permanently lost. Its experience, its technology, its methodology, all lost to the winds of time. Maybe they can be recorded, but even if you were to rebuild the same Humpty Dumpty, it might not behave the same way. Each Vanguard is truly sapient, and they might ultimately change their methodology completely. So as a result, fighting Helldivers a lot, the Vanguard units have gotten the shit kicked out of them, and a lot of them have died. So far, I've said there's 20 Vanguard units been manufactured by the Coordinator, who kind of builds these things as sort of a proof of concept, I guess is the easy way to describe it. So today we're going to work on another Vanguard. Namely, I believe we're going to be probably working on Vanguard 5. So let's take Vanguard 14 here, who we currently have set there. We're just going to duplicate that. We're going to make sure this is set as Vanguard 14. This next one is going to be Vanguard 5. Before I forget, we're going to save this, because I'll regret not saving this. We're going to close all these. Nope. I'm also recently expanding a lot of my old doodles into slightly like wider panels. Recently, I got into doing full-page comic panels, and I'm possibly going to go back and redo all the old ones as full pages as well. So, if you're on our Patreon, which, by the way, I highly recommend if you like the webcomic, maybe go check out my Patreon. Patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. Everything I do, my YouTube channels, my Twitch streams, my webcomic, all of it, it comes down to the patrons supporting me. My incredible tier 1s, Ampersand, Atlas, Heinrich, thank you all so much. My incredible tier 2s, Necronomulus and Souls Rolls. And of course, my amazing tier 3, Mossy the Mighty. Much love to you, my friend. If you're out there watching, thank you as always. You too can be a member of the Patreon. We have memberships going from $6.99 all the way up to, if you really want to, dropping like $50 a month on me. You don't need to. Any amount given is really appreciated. And in exchange, patrons enjoy a couple benefits. They get my webcomics 2 weeks early. They get my TTRPG work and games that I'm developing for free. And on top of that, those patrons at higher levels even get shoutouts during streams and in my webcomics. So keep an eye out for that. Alright, now we've done all that, let's take a moment and just reduce our opacity here. And we're going to start working on Vanguard 5. We can reduce this a little further, I think. There we go. And we can probably take a lot of the design notes currently off the side here. But I want to sort of... well, let's leave a couple of them here. Actually, let's leave these all here, because they're all relevant to what we're doing. So, Vanguard 5. Let's go into our sketch layer here. Let's take the ammo pack off. We have ourselves a block layer. We have ourselves coloration, lighting, glows, and I always keep an Automaton star on the design because of course I would. Why wouldn't you? Alright, so let's start working on our sketch, shall we? And also, if anyone has any questions or they want to chat, please feel free. Let me also get the actual art back up. I've been doing stuff over here, and no one said anything. Hey, Koopa! Good to see you. Welcome aboard. Hope you're all doing well. Alright, let's get ourselves a sketch going. So far, we've already done a little bit of work on Vanguard 14. They're more or less... They're pretty much solid in their design. I don't really need to do too much else with them. We're going to scoot Vanguard 14, and you can see there's a 6-foot Gentry as a silhouette to scale back here. So we're going to work around with that. We're going to play around with this a tad. So let's get our sketch layer going. This is our old sketch layer, mind you. So let's get to work here. I'm thinking we're going to want to start with a very simple silhouette. So V5 has this very, angular kind of head design. We're going to go with that. Put that at a max opacity here. There we go. So I have V14 having this, angular, almost kind of it almost looks like the top of a house, kind of, when you look at it. Have you ever seen someone with, a strange, one of those, kind of roofs, the pointed roofs that meet in the middle? Sort of has that look to it. So we have ourselves a general, head shape design. I might make it a little taller, just a hair taller. And then we have it come to a larger point in the back. That'll do. So I have done basically nothing with V5 except for the head design, which you guys probably can't see right now because of the positioning. There we go. This, over here, is the head design for V5. That's what we're working with. So we got this little conical house head guy. And my thought was, we're making what is basically an attack helicopter of a mech. This dude here is basically built around the idea of attacking from above, dropping bomblets and murdering people with a lot of knives. Let's read specifically what Vanguard 5 has. Ahem. Example 3. Vanguard 5 was fitted with a thruster array and several armor-piercing harpoons to ambush Helldivers in dense terrain. I mean, really, do we need to say more? How dangerous that sounds? Dude flying overhead and just suddenly get impaled and yanked away? I think that works. So we're going to sort of run with that design a little bit. Alright. How's everybody else doing today, by the way? Just curious. How are you all doing? We're just going to sort of pop this in. And we're just going to take this. And I'm going to try to do a slightly more dynamic pose for V14. I know I don't need to, but I want to. So I will. Because I want to. Alright, we got this. And again, they all tend to use the same design, roughly speaking. They tend to use the same parts. My thought is basically the Vanguards build themselves not unlike Legos. They sort of have, several component parts that they all share. And then everything after that's just kind of, well, spare parts. So we're going to have ourselves a little bit of that there. So here's where I'm starting to think about, distinctions. Almost all Vanguards are humanoid, as a result. They tend to have arms and hips. And that's kind of where they socket in. They're not unlike action figures in that way. God, what's the... Construction figures. And anyone who doesn't know what a construction figure is, are you aware of Bionicle? That would be what we're talking about here. It's basically the plan, is they're all construction figures. So they literally build themselves as they need. So my thought is this. I want to have wings on this dude. Not in the traditional sense. We're not going to do big angel wings. This isn't a Gundam wing. Instead, my thought is we're going to have some kind of thruster array. It'll probably be coming primarily out of the sockets where the arms are. However, like we have on Vanguard 14 back here, which if we can turn this off and bring Vanguard 14 back up to full opacity here. There we are. So you can see Vanguard 14 on her right shoulder actually has this ratcheting kind of gear assembly that allows her artillery cannon to move up and down, but also sort of drivetrain forward and back to adjust posture. This way, if she finds herself in a straight fight, she can literally ratchet the gun straight forward and fire right out of the side of her chest, which gives her better stability and allows her to kind of cornhole anyone who shows up directly in her line of sight, as well as being able to ratchet back and fire in a more traditional artillery-style howitzer situation. But also, you can see that on the bottom, she's got this little robot arm. It's very easy to miss this little robot arm. You gotta have little arms occasionally. And I kind of figure that robot arm is both to stabilize and also to help reload and maintain the cannon mechanism in case anything goes sideways. And it, too, rotates along this track. So if anything happens, if she needs to unjam the gun, or she needs to, like, change ammunition boxes, or even perhaps disengage and repair in the field, she can do that with that mechanical arm. So my thought is, Vanguard 5 has 2 of these, and uses them to sort of do actual hand manipulation, while the arms are actually boosters. That would be my immediate thought. So we're going to go back to our sketch over here. And in fact, actually, the dynamic pose is not working in my favor. So we're just going to pop in here. We're just going to do a traditional straight-on view here so that I can have a good reference. I want the neck to be a little longer on Vanguard 5, because we're talking about a machine that's basically helicoptering around. So having a longer neck actually means they can see further. It's literally like having a periscope built into your head, which is kind of what all of them can do. Technically, their height varies wildly as a result. They tend to stand, on average, roughly about 7 feet tall. But they can ratchet their height probably up to about 10 feet, give or take. And basically, what I'm doing here is I'm making my equivalent of Starscream, right? It's basically what we're building here. We're building a Starscream. So we're going to take these arm bits here. Sort of bring them down. Give ourselves a nice gap for that drivetrain to take place. And this is just a quick doodle here. We're not going too intense. We're just sort of working with what we've got. Okay, and then we sort of bulk that up here, bulk that up here. This sort of comes down a little bit. Cool. Alright, and now we've got a general shape for what we're looking for. Down here I have these exhaust fans. Because all the Vanguards are a little bit bigger than your average automaton. Technically they actually stand bigger than Devastators. So they have a lot of waste heat they have to bleed off. So I figure they've got a ton of like these kind of vents all over the place. So this is where I start getting into like, how are we going to do the arms and the legs here? So the lower arms I figure will be easy. Literally sort of like the same assembly as we have on the other one. Or just sort of like, comes down to like a little hand on both ends. And it can traction up and down. There we go. So we've got our little hands here. Next, we need to get the actual torso, which I'm intentionally making very, like, mechanically serpentine. I kind of want these things to, again, read as non-human as possible. And that means giving them unnaturally thin waists, unnaturally thin bodies, even though they're as big and bulky as a human. Like, their torso is actually about as wide as ours, if not a little wider. Their shoulders certainly are wider than ours, but they're stretched out, kinda. Someone added too many joints onto their action figure. So now we have this sort of same center torso, or center, like, lower torso assembly going on here. Here we go. Now, each of the vanguards have their own unique personality matrix, so to speak. Each of them does their own thing. I don't like the idea of them being completely monolithic as a species. Again, the Coordinator is interesting because he's this Machiavellian intelligence that happens to be on the right side of history in my comic, which is very strange to see. It's literally having, like, a dangerous, high-functioning sociopath who's working for the betterment of others. Which, for the record, again, and this is something I feel I need to emphasize, sociopathy is a condition. It isn't who you are. There are plenty of folks out there that are sociopathic and are actually decent people, or at least trying to be. And I think that's important. I want to convey the automatons not in the trope of these big, dumb, I am inevitable kind of machines, but instead as people, just different people. Because I think that's what sort of drives home how important these sort of battles are. Okay, now we get into the part where I'm going to have a bit of fun here. Trying to work out how these arms are going to work. So I want these boosters to sort of look a little different than most. Let's take a look at actually a little bit from Helldivers. A little bit of, like, actual art from Helldivers. Helldivers 2 Hover Pack. There's, like, one particular set of gear that's very specific, which is the Hover Pack, the Lift Pack. A lot of folks have been capturing, like, images of it for a while, and likewise, they also have the Illuminates pack as well. So if we go to the Illuminates, and I take a look at the Elevated Overseer and its backpack. Unfortunately, most of the reference that I had to get for the Elevated Overseer is literally corpses. Turns out it's very hard to ask one of these guys to stand still for a photo. So you kind of just blow them up and take a photo after. But okay. So, Elevated Overseers. Whoop, there we go. We're just popping through all the art I've got on my Illuminate here. Here we go. So, Elevated Overseers literally hover about. They kind of have this, like, VTOL jetpack aesthetic that works pretty well for them. And I've done the same sort of thing with my Illuminate character, Vikern. More on him in another stream in the future. We have more than just one faction represented in Gentry. I want all the Helldiver factions to come into play. And also a bunch of sub-factions for Super Earth and humanity that we haven't seen before. I'm basically making the Andor comic for Super Earth, for Helldivers, if I were to explain it that way. So, we have this sort of booster array where these boosters sort of face off to the side. And likewise, if I can sort of reset the size of this. There we go. Okay. On the side, we also have this here. This is the actual booster pack, more or less, that Helldivers wear. So you can sort of see how they've got this, like, these nozzles here that are constantly adjusting. And this large center booster pack. This negates your mass. These are what we would consider to be, like, would be a good way to describe them, station-keeping boosters. These actually maneuver you where you need to go. They're just people is also my approach, and you've read that rant on Blue Sky. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I actually don't like when video games create big, dumb, monolithic, like, enemies to fight and shoot. I don't think it's smart. And by that I mean, and follow me on this, I think it's actually inherently dangerous. I believe that there's nothing wrong with not wanting to go into great detail about every part of an enemy's backstory, or even having like just a feel-good blow things up kind of thing. But it also has to be done intelligently, which is one of the reasons I like Helldivers. Helldivers goes out of its way to be like, yeah, we're the baddies. Humanity in this setting is not the good guys. You're fighting against extinction entirely brought on by a ruling class of evil assholes. You are not the good guys. You're fighting as the bad guys. And I feel like that's the best part of Helldivers, is through the aliens we see exploitation for resources. Like, if we're talking about the bugs, that's basically what they are. They're literally harvested for oil. Element 710, which if you flip 710... hold on. Flip 710 around, and, well, you know, it's pretty obvious what you're looking at. There's not much nuance that need be there in that regard. But while you're fighting against this, like, it's important, I think, for us as players to acknowledge what we're dealing with. Like, and that means that the actual game devs need to be very careful. It's one of those things where I think a lot of people will often hide behind the idea that, oh, well, it's parody, or a game is parody. But parody requires that everyone be in on the joke for it to be effective. And when people aren't in on the joke is when it goes from parody to informative. It's my biggest critique with the movie Starship Troopers, which I love to death. I think Starship Troopers is excellent. But there's a weird brand of people out there who are just unaware enough to not realize that maybe the movie about a bunch of superstar, like, supermodel-looking soldiers getting repeatedly stabbed and murdered to death by bugs on planets we are probably not meant to be on. Maybe we're not the good guys. And there's a weird group of people that don't really pick up on that. That don't get that the fascism in that is actually kind of not a bug, but a feature. Also, let's take a moment here. So, we actually have the head again of V5 right over here. And I want to make sure I get those receptors correctly. So, they have a big center receptor. And two little receptors on the side. Besides, I am also a strong believer as a science fiction, like, artist and fan, that all science fiction characters are a lens by which we examine our humanity. So what's the point of having a character that has none, right? So, okay. So we've got ourselves these, particularly, like, these lower legs. This is where things get experimental, as it were. I'm going to take Vanguard 14 and elevate our friend here. I have yet to assign a, like, gender identity to them. Because, again, my slight spoiler, but Vanguard characters are based off of human intelligence identity cores. So in a way, they're kind of similar to us. They have similar intelligences, similar personalities. It's in a non-human frame, but it's human enough. And so they have identities. They choose what they want to be, what they wish to be identified as. So I feel like, you know, as an example, V14 self-identifies as feminine. And so they use pronouns she, her. I'm still assigning pronouns to V5. We'll see about that. Kind of feeling it out, you know. So as far as legs go for V14, I feel like we need to give them a unique set of legs. These aren't just legs that are meant to telescope up and down in order to, like, actually land and walk. These are meant to take an impact. We're talking about a character that flies. And so, as a result, let's also work on these boosters up here a little bit. Kind of like the idea of them being very wide, sort of, almost. And we're also going to have these be sort of collapsible a little bit, so they can roll in and expand out. So that way when they're station keeping, like, you know, you basically have this, like, long figure flying around. As I zoom in here. My goal is basically a figure that sort of darts in and out, not unlike a bat. So they've got these really long limbs that are designed to absorb impact, but also to grab. Kind of going for General Grievous feet here. So they can grab Helldivers and sort of yank them away. But then, in addition to that, they probably got these other limbs. And I want their actual boosters to be able to sort of extend outward. So they can get more width, more coverage, actually sort of like help them fly around a little bit more, with a little bit more agility than just like hovering in place. Again, we're making a Starscream here, so I want the wings and the booster assemblies to actually meaningfully move. So let's get in here very quick. So we got one set up here. Got two sets here. And then we got the set that connects them. And there we go. That will do. So that gives us a nice compact folding mechanism by which they can sort of expand. Nice. That works pretty well. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Actually, hold on. I think what we'll do is, because this is a wider character than our last one. Let's actually take this and sort of expand it out a little bit. We can actually use some of the space we're getting to properly stretch this out. There we go. So in this case, this would be if these were a little more extended outward. Which would allow our friend here to fly significantly further. That's about right. I'm literally measuring this out the old-fashioned way. So actually we could probably get it to about there. Then we could probably take this whole assembly and move it even further out. Alright, so our character's pretty wide here. Or they can get a pretty long stretch out. There we go. That'll do. And we'll sort of work on the actual booster assemblies here. But this feels pretty good so far. Now, as far as its actual, like, arms go, I kind of want turrets as well. This thing's got harpoons, right? So we need to have the ability for this thing to actually fire its harpoons. So I figure we have these arms here that are purely weapons, designed specifically for skewering. And it's probably got lines, actually, in the backs of its arms. Because I like the idea that this actually isn't just a I shoot someone and they kind of just go down. These things are literally designed to reel people in. To reel in Helldivers and yank them off the ground. So if they weren't dead before, they will be dead by the time they come back down again. So these things have a line that's connected to the back. And it's probably not a particularly long mechanism. That should be probably more than enough here. There we go. We have our sharp angles for automaton parts. We have our spool. Okay, cool. So we've got ourselves a pretty good harpoon there. I actually really like the design of that. We're going to copy that, reflect it, literally mirror it. Flip that horizontal, save that so I don't lose any work. Nice. Okay, cool. And then we just sort of expand over there. I'm actually going to grab this little guy. I can see he's sort of hovering in the way. We're going to move this little sketch part. I said we're going to move this little sketch part. There we go. Slightly out of the way, so I can still have it as a reference. Cool. Merge this sketch down. Now I should be able to move the whole thing. That's about right. So this gives us a pretty good gauge as to how big this character is. I also kind of want to give them fins as well. Some kind of stabilizers. One, to help frame their silhouette, because their silhouette's a little messy right now. And I kind of like the idea of having, like, very simple stabilizers there. Alright, and we just sort of straighten that out a little bit. Perfect. Okay, now we're pretty good. So chat, while you guys are sitting there and watching and enjoying, and I hope you're all having a good time so far, does anyone have any particular movie robots they've really liked? Like, what's a particular robot in fiction you've always been a big fan of? I'm curious what you all think. For me, I've always been partial to, like, if there's one... There's, like, probably 2 to 3 that I'm really big fans of. One, I'm a sucker for the B-1 battle droid from Star Wars. I won't pretend I'm not. I have always liked those goofy little goobers. I think they're very fun. I've also always been a fan of the robot from Lost in Space. Namely, the robot from the Lost in Space early 2000s, or like late 90s. Robot Lost in Space. I think it's 1998 was that came out? I believe so. There's something very distinctively, like, hulking about it. In the movie, they call the robot a Rambler Crane series robot. And I feel like that name is perfect for what it is. It's this big, hulking boy. It's massive. It's bigger than nearly anything else in the whole damn movie. And there's just something very cool about its design. It's also an entirely practical effect. Like, the whole thing was made by people and piloted by like 3 to 4 puppeteers. And it's just such a cool idea. I love its design. Like, you can tell how big and weighty it is. Like, by just looking at people in comparison to it. It's so big! Look at that thing! I love that. See, BR04 from Monsters of a Man is definitely a favorite. BR04 Monsters of a Man. Let's see what we're talking about. Oh, yeah! Okay, I think I've seen this. I've seen that design. Did Ken Watanabe play him? I don't remember who it was. There's like a particular actor who... Oh, no, hold on. It's not Ken Watanabe. It's someone else. Hold on, I know exactly what you're talking about, though. That thing looks absolutely cool. Hold on, let me open it up for you guys to actually see it. Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's such a good design. Oh, I love it. It's peak. It's so good. I love the asymmetrical eyes, the frame that's human enough to clearly, like, indicate an anatomy. It's so good. The 2018 reboot is pretty good. I like the 2018 reboot from Lost in Space. I'm also a huge fan of both, and I feel like this is one of those I had to, like, split the hair on, because they sort of feel like they're the same thing to me. So, first off, I feel like Chappie is this very specifically, like, brilliantly designed machine that has this very cool, like, aesthetic to it. It's very much split between the, oh god, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like Bubblegum Crisis or something, I think. Let's see. Robot, character. It's like one particular character I can't remember the name of, and it's gonna kill me. It's not Bubblegum Crisis, but it's in that same ballpark. God, it's gonna kill me. But Chappie has that same set of, like, ears, and that same design. It's very immediately evocative. It works so well. And in that same vein, I also very much like E3N from Call of Duty. Like, there's this one particular character called Ethan in Call of Duty. In one of the Call of Duty games. It's Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Which, by the way, not a great game. Has a lot of problems with it, but Ethan is not one of them. Ethan is, in fact, one of the best parts of the damn game, bar none. Look at this boy. Look at him. He's perfect. He's charming and characterful and hilarious, and he's literally everything a robot should be in fiction. He is a perfect reflection of the human condition. And more than just, like, in terms of... Let me just take a look at concept art. Oh, good. There's an actual, like, full image concept art of him. Here we go. Ethan. E3N. So, one of the things I like the most about Ethan's design is the fact that Ethan immediately communicates humanity. Just instantly. He is meant to be read as a character. And so, his acting is fantastic. He's incredibly practical. Like, his design borrows a lot from modern robotics. Namely, the Honda and Mitsubishi robots that have very specific, like, leg structure for how they move and walk around. It's basically a flat pad with all the axes of motion. Its legs are very square and bulky, but they cover everything that they need to cover. The arms are a little bit more humanoid, but that's because they're basically cybernetic limbs. The face is very simple. It's literally just a camera. But it's a camera that focuses and adjusts, and the plates all move. And more importantly, what always captured me with Ethan was, much like Chappie, is Ethan's humanity. The single best part of that game is, and I'm going to spoil it because it's a game that's literally, at this point, unplayable almost, and it's nearly, like, I think it's almost a decade old now. It's like a decade, a half a decade old. It's at least 5 years old. There's a part where Ethan and the main character get trapped in space. Literally, they just, like, they miss their docking in the middle of a battle, and the ship that's carrying them has to pull out. And so they, you know, they're left floating there. And the main character's got a suit leak. And they're slowly suffocating. And, you know, up until now, Ethan's been, like, he's still been a charming character. He cracks a lot of jokes. He has a lot of fun. But he's this one particular moment there where he's floating with his commander. And he's trying to seal the leak, but he can't because he doesn't have a patch or a way to do it. And they just sort of float there, and the commander's like, just let it go. Just let it go. It's fine. How are you? And there's just, like, this pause, and he just goes, I think I'm scared. And it's so real. And I love that. That's what I think the best fictional robots are so good at doing, is portraying in context human emotion in a way that catches people off guard. That reminds us that no matter who we are or how we look or our skill sets, we're people. We get afraid. We get sad. we get enthusiastic. Like, Ethan builds meaningful, real friendships in the game. And I love that. For him, and for us, who get to observe it. And I think that's just the coolest shit. I love that. And that's kind of what I want to do for the Vanguards. I want these characters to not just be these implacable foes of humanity who kill their best and their brightest, or... Okay, calling a Helldiver our best and brightest is probably an insult to our best and brightest. Who kill those who try to protect us. Kill those who are ostensibly fighting for us. They're more than just that. They are people who've been drafted into a war by their very creation. And it's not a thing they're eager for. They're not excited for the opportunity to kill people. And I think that's really pivotal. If these characters are going to communicate what I want them to communicate, they need to be capable of emoting beyond just, you know, the gloaty kind of like video game dialogue you get out of enemies. They need to convey, like, all the complexity of what it means to be a human warfighter, which is fear, sorrow, rage, uncertainty. Is it right what we're doing? Is it right how we're fighting? Should we be fighting at all? Like, these are things that I think, if you're not asking as a warfighter, you shouldn't be at war. And I'm trying my best to remind people in the comics that the most inhuman thing in Helldivers is what humanity allows itself to become through Super Earth, which is a fascistic power. That, to me, is the most important detail of it. Everything else is almost secondary to that consideration. So, okay. We've got these, like, sharpened little feet that come to a point. They articulate and allow someone to, like, sort of grab. Kind of like the idea of, like, each of the foot pads literally is kind of like a hand. And I'll just literally draw the underside. So they've got kind of like... They've actually got hands down there. That let them actually grab people. And all this sort of tied in with a singular leg that sort of goes up. Cool. So you can sort of see how, like, the claw assembly works for the bottom of their feet. So this guy literally flies in, grabs someone, and like a lot of actual birds of prey, and this is a fun detail. I don't know how many folks out there are actually aware of, like, how a lot of birds of prey function. Most birds of prey don't actually fly in and kill people with their claws or their beak. A lot of them do. But 9 times out of 10, the biggest, strongest birds of prey, who hunt particularly large prey, don't do that. Instead, they'll just swoop down, snatch what they want to kill, pull it into the air, and let it go. And let gravity do the killing. And there's just something so perfect about that design. It's horrible, it's terrible, it's nightmarish, and humans have an inherent fear of being dropped. Reasonably. We don't handle gravity well. There's plenty of insects and animals that just don't give a shit. Most bugs, dropped from almost any height, will live. They just simply do not possess the mass to hit a terminal velocity that'll kill them, or meaningfully hurt them. They'll reach a certain speed and they'll just kind of go, whatever, air resistance has got me. And that's basically it. That's why ants don't usually die from falling, most insects don't die from falling. Even big insects don't. Some lizards can handle significant heights, and a lot of, like, light birds can even handle a fall from a decent height. Especially when they're, you know, particularly fluffy and very, very light. Like, even an uncontrolled fall from a couple of feet might hurt them, but might not kill them. But a human, anytime you get over 10 feet, you're starting to gamble with your life. And arguably, even at 10 feet, if you land wrong, you'll still die. Depending on what you fall onto, A 10-foot drop will kill you. The number of people who die to just oops my ladder is unbelievable in the United States and across the world. So, I kind of don't like how big these arm cannons are, so I'm going to slowly reduce the size of them a little bit. Let's take that and just shrinky-dink it down just a little bit. Just a hair. That's a little better. It's a little more manageable. Looks a little bit less, like, supersized. There we go. We'll do the same thing here. Okay, and we'll just shrink that down until it more or less matches its buddy on the other side. That's good enough. A little smaller. Good enough. Cool. So Vanguard 5 is coming along pretty good, though. I love that. So you've got these literal harpoon guns for arms that are able to sort of just like fly around and impale people and drag them up into the sky. Also, like, I believe I had bomblets as well. So armor-piercing harpoons to ambush Helldivers. They have their claws. I believe I was debating giving them like bomblets to sort of do what was like a particular unit in Warhammer 40,000 for the Eldari called Swooping Hawks, where their whole thing is they fly into the air using jetpacks, and then they drop from the sky, arrest their momentum, and as they do, they have bomb packets and grenades literally built on like I guess like grenade emitters, but like grenade ports on their legs. The momentum just sort of shakes them loose, so they fly up, drop down, and a bunch of grenades just fall off of their legs and blow up everything below them while they shoot into the crowd. And then as soon as they literally touch down, they fly right back into the sky again. And they just keep doing that, dropping in and out, dropping contact bomblets. I feel like the harpoons are more than powerful enough for that. Like, the whole point of Vanguard 5 is that Vanguard 5 picks off Helldivers when they're on the ground and scattering. So, like, that's sort of the whole idea behind their methodology of combat. They're not there to fight them on even terms. None of the Vanguard are. Instead, they're there simply to drop in and just sort of kill them when they're alone. Almost like the Automaton equivalent of a stalker from the Terminids. This big, terrifying thing that flies on mostly quiet motors, which is the thing I want to focus on. I want this guy to be able to ambush people. So I don't want the motors to be like traditional boosters. I want them to be almost anti-gravity. It would be a great way to do that. There's part of me that also wants to be able to teleport too, because I think that could be useful. Because so far, Vanguard 14 has the equivalent of an autocannon array, basically, on their back. More or less. Technically, it's more like a railgun, an upgunned railgun, but the same kind of idea. Combined with a submunition, or like combined with a large fighting knife on one hand, collapsible limbs that let it, like, telescope up and down, and an ammo pack just keep replenishing it. So Vanguard 14 is kind of like the literal autocannon user in Helldivers. We've all been the autocannon user, where you just kind of walk around and you autocannon things until they're all dead. It's a surprisingly effective method. It works really well. But yeah, that's kind of what Vanguard 14 is. This character, on the other hand, is very much a hunter. They go out, they scavenge, find their target, and put them in the ground. So we have our articulating claws. I don't like how thin the waist is now. I want this character to read as, like, nimble and agile. But I think their reading is a little too agile, if that makes sense. Let's pull this in a little more. They're looking a little too unnatural. Even by the standards I'm going for. I want their physicality to make some degree of sense. Oh, hold on. New mode, not add mode. There we go. We can sort of take that. We can just move it a little bit more, rotate it a tad. There we go. I might want to even rotate it further. Yeah, there we go. We can just rotate the actual engine pod here. There we go. A little better. So we can sort of see, like, the adjustments that this machine makes as it walks. I really want to change how the legs look. They aren't thick enough. Let's really bulk these legs out. I want them to have extra motors, extra weight to them. I want them to be hefty. I might need to move these little weedy arms a little bit. Just a little bit. There we go. So now we can sort of bulk out the hip joint a lot more. Which I really want that hip joint to be super secure. That's kind of the goal here. I want this to be like a really big, heavy joint. There we go. So we've got this big, heavy set of hips. The legs look significantly thicker now, at least there. That works. So now we just need to work on these hips. You can't have a narrow waist like that and thick hips without some muscular support. So I kind of like the idea of like there being a reinforcing component. Like connects between these joints going back. Yeah, there we go. Slightly more anchoring. And then we have the stabilizers that I tend to stick in the back. They tend to have like these cylinder-looking things. Those are actually gyroscopes. Liquid metal gyroscopes that spin at great speed and help them maintain their balance. So you got this very thick lower body and this moderately like wide upper body. That feels pretty good to me, actually. I'm kind of digging where it's sitting. Let's get a little bit more work done on it. I know we can do way more work than just this. So now we've got a good silhouette for what we're planning here. Let's get to the actual block. This is where things get kind of crazy. I'm going to put the block at like a good 45%. Perfect. Now, I figure the back probably has a very large booster assembly to negate the weight. Because our friend here is, even with, like, ultralight metal compounds and stuff, and I figure V5 is probably very lightweight aluminum metal. Like, we're talking aircraft-grade materials here. Super durable, super strong, but also super lightweight. Even with that, this character definitely weighs several hundred pounds. We're probably looking at about 500 pounds worth of metal here, flying around. Now by filling all this out, we're able to kind of build up a little bit. There we go. There's a part of me that wants to make them very angular. Like, go for broke on this design in terms of, like, how sharp it is. But I don't want to do that because I'm still trying to stay true to the original Automaton concept here. As best as possible. And automatons have a very blocky, specific kind of look to them. I kind of want to adjust the posture of those arms a little bit. Now that I've got a good design on like what the actual harpoons should look like. We're going to copy paste, pull that to the side. There we go. Harpoon reference. Beautiful. So let's work on that positioning of these arms. So we've got these sort of like, these arms sort of held almost akimbo, kind of. There we go. Sort of like that. And then we just sort of have that coming up. That works. And then we have the actual muzzle with the spear tip coming out of it, the harpoon tip. Very broadhead-esque. So I figure they're serrated, probably, designed to actually stick into a target and pull back and hook. Keep them on this, basically keep them on a line. Prevent them from just sort of like running around, right? So this figure does have a posture. They're literally walking, but they have two sets of arms. So usually the rule of thumb is when you walk, whichever leg you're leading with, the opposite arm is the one that's leading forward. Basically, it's a way to counterbalance yourself. So when you're walking, when you walk, it isn't just your leg one foot in front of the other. It's your upper body swinging from side to side. So a better example would be if I were to, I guess, God, I haven't done this in a while. So take a human hand, and when a human hand is walking, one hand swings in the other way. So it's literally my right foot means my left arm be moving. My left foot, right arm moving. Yada, yada. Back and forth. And that's sort of how that tends to work. And we'd have to do the same with our figure here. I'm just going to re-angle these. I figure I already have a figure of like what it looks like flying. So we'll just sort of keep it lower. The little concessions you make when you're drawing and you're like, oh god, I don't want to kill my darlings, but sometimes you need to kill your darlings in order for something to look correct. Here we go. Alright, and that works for me. So we've got these. I might literally just, like, condense these wings back a little more. Yeah, I think that's probably sufficient, actually. That'll do. So going very Starscream with those wings. They sort of slide back and into a position that sort of frames the back of the head, almost like a collar. That looks pretty decent, actually. Let's get back to our block here. As you can see, it's a little out of position now, but it's fine. We'll work around it. There we go. That feels pretty good. So we have these big booster assemblies. And I'm going to leave the other arm, like, in where it is, because it sort of has that, like, arm forward kind of walking. Like, the arms are sort of stretched out around the inner arms. So they kind of had to stretch it out a little wider. You gotta go akimbo sometimes, you know? It's like a gunslinger stance. It's very gunslingery. It has to be. And just like that, we've managed to sketch out ourselves another Vanguard. Everyone say hello to Vanguard 5. I am very content with this design. This does everything I want it to do. Slowly and steadily provides us with a good frame of reference for how Vanguard 5 works and operates. This is pretty much exactly what I was aiming for. Slowly, bit by bit, it sort of reveals a little bit of sort of how this machine functions. And immediately, just by looking at it, you can tell precisely what V5 does. And when we stack V5 up next to their friend in V14, which we're just going to move this over a little bit. Grab the whole thing and sort of scooch. We can immediately see how V14 stands pretty toe-to-toe. Like, they look like sisters. And that works for me. That's what I'm going for here. To tie all the aesthetic back together so that even when you have different Vanguards made for different functions, the parts all read as the same, the mechs all read as similar, their equipment is clearly equivalent to each other, and you can just, at a glance, figure out exactly what each one fights like and does. Because at the end of the day, I want to spend more time characterizing them than defining how they fight. Everyone loves a good fight scene in a comic. But there's a reason why most comics are dialogue, and why fight scenes are only a couple panels long. It's usually because the fights are fun, but the dialogue is where the real story lives. So thank you all for joining me today. I genuinely appreciate having you all on board. It was a great time. I hope you guys tune in for more in the future. We'll be, as usual, going every Wednesday. Actually, let's do the quick schedule super fast. So, every Tuesday, I have a Discord hangout on my Discord. Go to my Patreon, sign up, and you too can join. Likewise, occasionally will even post a little, you can come and join the Discord at this link. And in fact, actually, I might just do that, just for you guys right now. So I'm going to post inside the live chat at the moment a join my Discord invite. Here we go. So everybody who's interested, please feel free to join me in my Discord right there at the link that just appeared in the live chat. You're more than welcome if you're not already present. So we have ourselves a live Discord hangout where we play video games and chat casually and just have a good time on Tuesdays, roughly around like noonish. On Wednesdays, I have a Twitch live stream from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. EST, where I play video games. I've been playing a lot of BattleTech and enjoying it immensely. And likewise also Thursdays, same time, I tend to do art streams on this channel right here. And every other Saturday from 1:30 p.m. to roughly about like 3:30 p.m., I tend to run my Legacy First Flight Fast and Light Tale in the World of Tomorrow, which is a TTRPG system that I've been working on as an indie project for 20 years, and we're starting to get into like that late alpha, early beta stage. But, as always, you guys just being here means the world to me. My patrons are incredible. They pay for all of this and help me keep going. We don't have a big Patreon community, and I'm looking to grow, so please feel free to join me at patreon.com/thelast-omnitect. And for those of you guys who are already there, thank you, as always, to Ampersand, Heinrich, and Atlas at Tier 1, Souls Rolls and Necronomulus at Tier 2, and my incredible Ironclad ally, Tier 3, Mossy the Mighty. You all are incredible. Thank you so much. And as always, Voyagers, I'll see you out there. Take care.